Welcome back. My name is Brian Heater. I am the managing editor of A3, and I am here with some colleagues, like two of the top Alexes at the A3 organization, Alex Shikany, Alex Coleman. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I'll start with you because the other day you caught me like running past and you asked me what I thought the trends of the show have been so far. So I'm going to flip the question and put it on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've seen some great things out there. It's been really interesting to see the diversity of technologies represented and also how these technologies are starting to really come together and combine to make more than the sum of their parts. We've seen a lot of vision integrated with robots and these full stack solutions. I've been referring to them throughout the show, where it brings together all the moving parts under one booth or one umbrella. So it's really been interesting to see that all come together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of vision with robots, even more so than in recent years.
Interesting.
I mean, 3D vision, 2D vision, even,
We had a company in the startup competition that does ultrasonic.
Yeah, Sonair. Yeah.
Sonair, very cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that. Sensors, sensing technologies, things that help autonomous mobile robots or even humanoids and other automation sense their environments, that type of thing. I've noticed a lot of that here this week.
It's interesting, and it's one of those things. I just was speaking with Stu Shepard before the two of you came on, and we were talking about vision as well. And it's one of those things that gets developed perhaps for a sector like this, but ultimately will affect like every part.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, all the work that's going into self-driving cars are also pushing the industry forward.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. And that I think that's been a big trend for me, is a lot of companies that are focused on a certain thing and have really just found that the market isn't quite what they expected and have kind of pivoted and filled their slot.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's really interesting to think about how the different form factors we have are going to continue to slot into the market as it expands, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have some people who believe that you're going to need to be specialized, like for any given application, like Kinesi, who won the startup competition.
Which we're starting from a point of specialization or single-purpose robots.
Right, and so some believe that that's the right approach. Others are charging ahead with the more generalist approach, right? We can create we should be able as an industry to create a humanoid or other form factor that is a jack of all trades, like a human being. You could drop them into any application and they could learn it or be trained on it. And so I think that's an interesting hypothetical to think about where we end up.
I think AI is really going to kind of underline that flexibility and that adaptability, whether it's as specialized as AI for vision models to make them a little more rugged and durable to weird edge cases, or like Alex was mentioning, dropping a robot into a scenario and redeploying it into another scenario, maybe throughout the working day.
Yeah.
Being able to use that same technology and that investment in more than one place, AI might help out with that.
So let's contrast last year and this year. I was at the event last year. Everybody was talking about humanoids. It was a big thing. Obviously, generative AI was a really big thing. Those two particular categories, how do you feel like that's changed in the past 12 or so months?
Yeah, so a lot has changed in just a year. We have more humanoids at this show than we had at the last show.
Okay.
Definitely. AI is pretty much present. I'm not going to say all. All is a lot. That's 100%. But a higher percentage of booths have some level of AI, either in the application or even in the product names. You see a lot of the company names, AI, .ai, but you also see a lot of products in booths that claim they have AI in them, right?
I was talking to somebody about this last night at the awards dinner, and there are companies that are changing their name to put AI in because there's a lot of money going into AI right now.
Yeah, we're going to change it. A big announcement. A3 is going to become AI
A4.
3.
A4.
Oh yeah, sure, that works.
Stick another. How about you? How have things changed in the last year?
Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest trends that I've noticed, is that you're seeing some of these technologies maybe ebb and flow and rise with the tides. The AI side, it's not just, I think, generative AI, but also AI being integrated into actual applications. I had talked about this a little bit. Yeah, in our keynote. Agentic AI for quality control, AI seeing applications beyond just, I think, what a lot of maybe consumers or people that are just dipping a toe into AI, they're used to like the chatbot interface. But now it's AI powering and underlying a lot of the technologies that are out on the floor. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
kind of get deployed.
The expectations, especially around, Gen AI or LLMs, are huge because so many people who aren't in technology, I'm sure all of our parents have used like ChatGPT at one point,
Yeah.
and it feels like magic. And
Yeah.
to a certain extent, I feel like these companies' jobs, and really like your jobs as well, my job is kind of tempering expectations as far as what technology can actually do today.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some of that, but I can't help think downstairs we had the student challenge, all week. We have some 1,600 students or so, which is a multiple of what we had last year. Walking around, thinking about how those folks, when they get into industry, are going to interact, program the automation we see around us. I can't help but think it's natural language processing. It's them talking to the system, telling the system through some type of Alexa or Siri type of thing that goes into an AI backend that can interpret or execute from an agentic perspective. It's going to be like interacting with another human being to program. It's not going to necessarily be like on a teach pendant, moving the XYZ coordinates. There's a lot of that out there, movement training and things like that, where the system knows and can learn how to properly do applications, without programming.
Yeah, that's particularly useful in like a factory setting or a warehouse setting. We're all talking about upskilling, and I think that's A3 plays a role in that as well. But it's not just about educating the next generation of roboticists or computer scientists. It's about people right now who have jobs who need to learn to work with the robots. And you're almost talking about removing gatekeeping a little bit from that industry.
Yeah. Well, think about it. If we're looking to reskill people, if we're talking about job displacement or the dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs that get displaced by automation, we need swim lanes or ways to get those people into the new roles that we know are being created. Robot technicians, right? You're right. It removes barriers if the training to get to a functional level of doing those new roles can be done more easily. You don't have to go through a year of teach pendant training or some certification, right? Necessarily. You could do it in a much easier way with something that is broadly understood, like communicating with a GPT.
There will always be a role for the roboticist and the computer scientist. They'll just be working on whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, of course.
One of the things I see it colliding with is the whole idea of cobots, where if you have that flexibility to easily work with and communicate with the robot, cobots might be even more important going forward, where you are seeing that closer collaboration with the hardware and the software side.
This is super fascinating to me because I think it was Monday, I was speaking with an executive at ABB, and he was giving me the broad timeline. We introduced our first electric robot like 60 years ago, something like that. And then we introduced our first cobot in 2015. And I was like, that kind of goes against what you would imagine the projection to be, right? As things become more automated, they're more self-sufficient, they're more autonomous. But there really has been a big trend in the past decade or so to move towards human-robot collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of them, I call them 21st century tools a lot because I've met people who are working with robots now, and they are having a ball. They enjoy their job. It's very cool technology to operate, to program, to deploy in different ways. There's almost like a fun gamification element to those roles and the people that I've met. And so if you could raise the bar or raise the work environment to a clean, technology forward environment that's fun for people to work in, I think you stand to attract more people to your space. You inspire the youth a little bit better, bring them over from like the tech jobs, that we see. You're from TechCrunch. You know this well, right? You've seen that.
I've heard, this is very, very anecdotal, like second or third hand, but that Gen Z specifically, a lot of folks in that generation are interested in working with their hands and are interested in a lot of these jobs, in the factories, are going to trade schools, which is a perfectly, if that's what you want to do, that's great.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a big sort of transition happening within the industrial context.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little more broadly to a point that you were making earlier, I think the pace of change is accelerating. Like you said, 60 years from one point to another.
Yeah.
But then in your previous question, you had just mentioned what have you seen change from last year's show? And I made a comment in our keynote talking about AI where I said, looking at the long term of AI, the next 6 months,
It's true.
Kind of all of these things are accelerating more rapidly than ever. And so I think it's great to be able to walk the show floor, see these developments, talk with the people shaping them, and, really get a finger on the pulse of what's changing, because it is changing so quickly.
Yeah, and the only thing I think with a shorter timeline is tariffs right now, as far as things changing from day to day, which, well, we won't get super into the politics of things, but obviously what's been happening now, these conversations about nearshoring or reshoring, been happening for, decades, obviously. A lot of that accelerated during the pandemic, but this past 6 months in particular, folks are really talking about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. as much as possible.
Yeah, and the uncertainty is quantifiable. So the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index is a metric that the National Bureau of Economic Research tracks. And you can actually see on that graph that uncertainty in today's economic policy, around today's economic policy, is higher than it was when COVID first started. That's quantifiable in terms of how that index tracks it. Highest in decades, frankly. So even despite that, we saw slightly positive sales performance in the first quarter for the robotics market in North America. And so as you walk the show, what I'm hearing is this same story. People don't know. The ground is shifting below our feet, but people don't really seem to believe that that's going to last for too long. They think it's more tactical, to a means to an end type of situation. And it's some interval of time between now and probably mid-year, we're going to have some more certainty around some of these key markets, and then things are expected to really, take.
I was speaking to an analyst right here yesterday about the tariff thing, and we sat down, and he said, the one thing I really want to talk about is uncertainty. And I pulled my iPad and I showed it was like the first bullet point on there, and that's really what it is. I think in a lot of ways, the uncertainty is the most difficult part for folks right now.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, there's 400,000 plus manufacturing jobs open that, against a low quit rate and rising manufacturing wages. So it's one of those things where when you have that workforce, you need to give them the tools they need to do their job as effectively as possible, to be a force multiplier for the manufacturing workforce you do have, and want to continue to grow with employee training, upskilling, all of those areas. So I think there is a lot of uncertainty out there, and it's tough to necessarily make those capital investments right now for automation technology or any capital investments, really. But when you do, I think you're finding that it really is offering benefits.
Well, one of the more interesting conversations I had on the floor yesterday was with the Arduino folks. And Arduino has had a really interesting pivot from hobbyists to they're actually like making boards for manufacturing, because they realized the thing that Apple realized, 40 or so years ago, which is if you want people to use their product at different points during your career, you build it into education. And it seems like education has been a really big part of the A3 mission as well.
Yeah, it's a huge part. I mean, the amount of educators we have this year around that student competition just engaged in the show. I mentioned the amount of students here relative to last year. I mean, it is growing so quickly. And to your point earlier, you brought up technical schools, you brought up associate degrees, these alternatives to 4-year collegiate education, right? We need that's a gap in the workforce right now. And so, we at A3 are thrilled to be engaging more of these schools, more of these educators. And I think you're only going to see this continue as we get into next year's Chicago show. As you go into 2027, this is going to be a growing component of, I believe, what we do here at Automate, for sure.
So we got a little less than a minute, so I'll put this to you. It could go either one of you. It seems like increasingly, and this is a great thing, safety is really becoming an integral part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's always been a focus. I mean, I know I can't speak authoritatively on it, but A3's had such a role in developing and designing these safety standards, partnering with these companies to make sure they're integrated, because it's just a fundamental part. You can't have effective automation without effective safety. And so I know that we've got some new standards. I hope you've had a chance to speak with our safeties and standards people about them. But yeah, it's going to be a focus going forward. One thing that I think is interesting will be the idea of safety around AI, where being a little less deterministic than, an XY move on a robot, and instead the output of an AI system. That'll be an interesting area to explore going forward.
Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much. I think I'm staying in this seat right now. Coming up next is my last interview of, I guess, the entire show. I'm speaking to the founder of Kinesi Robots, the winner of our recent competition. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome.